Good morning, class. So today we're going to be learning about the impact of development on the environment. So how do developing cities and developing countries, how do those impact the environment? How does the growing of cities and the growing of settlements maybe have a negative impact on our world? So to get started on that, let's start with our lesson today. You can look along with me in Google Slides here. So, sustainable development and developing nations. One thing we need to learn about when we're talking about development and sustainability in the world are two different main types of economies in the world and two main types of economic structures in the countries of the world. So there are two main general types of economies. So there are really complex descriptions that we can give about economies, but in general there are two main types: developing economies and developed economies. Developing economies are nations with an underdeveloped industrial base, so where people might have lower life expectancy, they maybe don't live as long, they have less access to quality health care, less educational opportunities, and a lower average income. This means that many settlements in these countries would be considered pre-industrial. There would be lots of agriculture and farming with less industry. In developing countries, there isn't as much infrastructure or public works, which means we might not be able to see organized or sustainably built metropolis or megalopolis cities in these countries. Developed countries with a lot of are countries with a lot of industrial activities and where people generally have higher incomes, more access to education and healthcare, and more developed infrastructure to live within. They have post-industrial economies, which means that they've even developed even further past industrialization, meaning that their service sectors, they have a lot of goods and services, but their service sector provides more wealth than the industrial sector, which produces goods. So that means that people make a lot more money on services, on doing things for others, instead of just manufacturing goods or making goods through agriculture or industry. There are many different countries in the world that don't fit perfectly into either definitions. And economies, cultures, countries, and cities exist on a big spectrum. So those are just some general terms, but know that many places in the world would be considered transitional, so somewhere in the middle. The world isn't black and white. There are always going to be shades of gray, but just know that those terms are useful for discussion and general understanding of a developing country and a developed country, okay? And a developing economy and developed economy, okay? Our world and its countries, cities, and economies have become more connected through something called globalization. So globalization is the process of people, companies, and governments worldwide interacting together and coming together. This means that developing countries and developed countries are coming together and working together in a way through globalization. And globalization has grown even more rapidly because of improvements in transportation and communication technology. So because we have airplanes and we can travel quickly and we have the internet, we can discuss and send information quickly, globalization is becoming a bigger part of our world. So with more global interactions, there's more international trade and share of ideas and culture. We're talking about economics or economies. Globalization involves goods, resources, services, and the economic resources of capital, which is what we call money. So different types of capital in different countries, but just money in general, technology, and data. So through globalization, developed countries and developing countries interact with one another, but it doesn't always mean that the interactions help both types of economies and both types of countries equally. And we're going to learn why right now. So how do these economies and nations impact the environment? Economic actions of the world can have really harmful impacts on the world and the environment, and we see this every day around us. We see it in the plastic bags that are thrown on the sidewalk. We see it in factories that dump waste products into water sources or into the environment. We see all the time how we as humans and our economic activities can be harmful to the world. But what happens often is that less wealthy and developing countries don't have the physical or economic infrastructure to benefit from globalization at the same rate that wealthier and developed countries do. That doesn't mean that developed countries do not face negative impacts from globalization, but it means that maybe developing countries, less wealthy countries, have a bit more. So more negative impacts than developed countries do. So they both face negative impacts from globalization, from really big economies and economic activities, but maybe less wealthy countries face more. Powerful companies can use workers or resources in developing nations, which work at a lower cost to make themselves richer, because when you have to pay your employees less, or you have to pay less for a material, that means that you can have a bigger profit in the end. That means that you get to keep more money for yourself. And this means that developing nations' resources and peoples and environment can be harmed by the economic activities in the world. An example of this you'll be able to see in this video. This same video I have attached here in our assignment, which you can watch here. It's the Issues in Globalization video. I want you to watch that to see an example of how globalization and development in the world can have a negative impact on the environment. Once you watch that video, you're going to come to our worksheet here called Impact on the Environment, and you're going to answer the first two questions. So after watching that first video, Issues in Globalization, that is attached here in our slideshow, you're going to answer those first two questions. Then once you've answered these first two questions, I want you to come back and watch this short video here, just 3 minutes long, about sustainable development, to see maybe what are some of the alternatives to this negative and environmentally harmful development that we have. What are some alternatives to that through sustainable development? So watch this video that will explain what sustainable development is and maybe how we can achieve it. And then I want you to explore the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are right here. And there are different goals that the United Nations has developed in order to ensure sustainable development in the entire world. I want you to explore these goals and watch that video and then come back and answer these second two questions here about what is sustainable development, why is it important, and what are 3 goals that could be the most important for developing more sustainable cities and societies. So we watch the first video and answer these 2 questions, the second video and explore the UN Sustainable Development Goals and answer these 2 questions. And then you're finished for the week. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you next Tuesday. Bye, guys.